Most people assume that once they hit seven figures, the retirement question answers itself. But we recently worked with a couple here in Alberta, both 58 years old, $1.4 million saved across their RRSP and TFSA accounts, and they genuinely didn't know if they could afford to retire. They wanted $10,000 a month. They had run multiple online calculators. One said they were fine. The next said that they'd run out of money before they would run out of time. The excitement they built up over decades of hard work was slowly being replaced by fear. And the question they couldn't answer, the one that kept them up at night, was this: do we actually have enough, or are we about to make a very expensive mistake? Hi, I'm Stefano Francesca, certified financial planner professional and senior wealth advisor at Next Step Wealth Management with IPC Securities Corporation. What I want to do is walk you through what we actually looked at with this couple, the gaps we found, the adjustments we made, and how they got from paralysis to a plan they could believe in. The reason I want to share this is specifically because Robert and Karen's situation isn't unusual. Most Canadians I work with who've built real savings still don't feel certain about retirement. They have the number. What they're missing is the confidence to believe it. If you find this helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps more Canadians see this. Let me introduce you to two people I'll call Robert and Karen. Not their real names, of course, but a real situation. Both 58, both Albertans. Robert spent decades in sales management, good at it, well compensated, the kind of person who always figured out how to hit the number at work, at home, and with money. But somewhere in the last few years, the job stopped being something he did and started being something he endured. Karen had already stepped away from her career a year earlier. She was ready. She had been for a while. And every morning, Robert went back to something he was done with. She watched him spend time he'd never get back on a problem they might have already solved. Together, they built $1.4 million across their RRSPs and TFSAs. They've been careful, patient, and deliberate. And they still didn't know if it was enough. Not because the math was obviously broken. For some odd reason, they weren't getting the planning advice they needed in their current product-focused financial relationship. That kind of uncertainty doesn't just create confusion, it creates paralysis. Robert kept on going to work, Karen kept on waiting, and neither of them felt like they could make a move. The first thing we do in a situation like this is get a rough sense of the landscape. Using a commonly referenced planning range of 4 to 5% annually, a $1.4 million portfolio may support withdrawals of approximately $56,000 to $70,000 per year from savings alone. That doesn't get them to $120,000. But that's not the whole picture either. Robert and Karen will both receive CPP, both will receive OAS. When you start layering in those income streams at the right ages, the numbers begin to approach their target. Approach, though, isn't the same as arrive. Robert still doesn't know if he's working years he doesn't need to. Karen still doesn't know if that trip is happening this year or in 5 years from now. The number gives them a range. It doesn't give them an answer. For that, we need to look at what the calculation isn't showing. The first thing it misses is the income bridge. Robert and Karen are 58. CPP can start as early as 60, but at a reduced amount. OAS doesn't begin until 65 at the earliest. The CPP benefit increases by approximately 0.7% per month, or about 8.4% per year. For each year, it's delayed after age 65 up to age 70, which can matter significantly over a long retirement. But delaying benefits means the portfolio carries more of the weight in the early years. How that bridge gets structured shapes everything that follows. Then there's the coverage gap. The day Robert hands in his notice, the employer benefits stop. Provincial healthcare continues, but dental, prescriptions, extended health, those are gone. Private supplemental coverage costs real money, and for a couple retiring at 58 in Alberta, that gap runs for years before provincial seniors programs come into play. That cost needs to be in the plan before the plan can be trusted. There's also what happens if markets fall early, especially if they maintain their current investment structure, which was not really designed for retirement income or for managing risk appropriately. Drawing monthly from a portfolio that drops 25% in year 2 of retirement means selling assets at a loss before recovery has time to happen. Sequence of returns risk is one of the most underappreciated threats to an early retirement. And many online calculators simplify that risk significantly. Without some sort of cash wedge and a review of their investment process, they're exposed to that risk. And then there's the conversation nobody wants to have. What if one of them eventually needs extended care? A plan that doesn't have some kind of answer for that isn't just finished yet. None of this is meant to be discouraging. Robert and Karen aren't in trouble, but each of these things needs an answer before each of them can feel settled. So we take it into actual modeling of a retirement, not a rule of thumb. We put in everything: RRSPs and TFSA balances, CPP and OAS at different start ages, spending by phase of life, tax implications of how and when each account gets drawn, return assumptions that reflect the real world, not an optimistic vision. What comes back is a more honest picture than a rough estimate can ever give you. And what it shows us early on is that their plan isn't quite where we want it, which is normal at this stage. It's actually why the process exists. The first thing we look at is how their spending is structured. When Robert and Karen said $10,000 a month, they built that number by adding up everything: mortgages, groceries, travel, healthcare, all of it. But these expenses don't age the same way. The mortgage gets paid off. Travel tends to be front-loaded. Most people do the long-haul trips in the early years of retirement, not at age 78. Healthcare inflates differently than their grocery bill. When we separate those out and map them to the right phases of their retirement, the plan looks usually better than the flat number suggested. We also look at the shape of their spending over time. Research suggests that people tend to spend more in their early years of retirement when they're active and healthy, less in the middle years, and then potentially a spike again and later in life when health costs rise. A retirement that accounts for that curve is more accurate and more often than not more encouraging than one that assumes the same spending forever on a straight line basis. Then there's the question of which accounts they draw from and in what order. RSP first? TFSA, non-registered? When does the RSP convert to a RIF? And what does that mean for their tax picture each year? How do they preserve their TFSA for the flexibility it gives them later? The sequence of withdrawals matters in ways most people don't anticipate, and getting it right can meaningfully extend how long the plan holds up. We also talk about how the plan gets managed once retirement actually starts. Rather than building towards a fixed target and then hoping nothing changes, we set guardrails, an upper and lower threshold around the withdrawal plan. If things drift below the low guardrail, maybe markets have been tough, maybe spending ran higher than expected, that's the signal to make a modest adjustment. Trim something discretionary for a period, draw from a cash buffer. It's not a crisis, it's just a course correction that needs to be made. If things rise above the upper threshold, they may actually have room to spend more than they had already planned. The goal isn't a perfect plan. It's a plan that can adapt when life changes. If you're in a similar position, real savings, approaching retirement, not sure whether the number actually supports the life you want, click the link in the description to schedule a complimentary retirement review. This begins the process of having a personal relationship with an advisor that knows you, can prioritize your goals, create a vision, and implement and monitor a plan that makes sense for you. We'll walk through your specific situation honestly and tell you what we see. In working with Robert and Karen, he asked a question that told me the work was successful. Not, will we be okay? He already moved past that. He asked Karen when she wanted to start planning the trip. The portfolio values hadn't changed. What changed was that Robert and Karen finally understood them well enough to trust them. Most Canadians who've built real retirement savings don't have a math problem. They have a clarity problem. They've been careful for 30 years and they don't know how to translate that into a number they can actually spend with confidence. So they wait. They stay in jobs they're finished with. They postpone things they're healthy enough to do right now. A savings balance tells you what you have. A tested plan tells you what you can do with it. If you're a Canadian retiree or within 5 to 10 years of retirement, and you're unable to answer those questions Robert and Karen were asking, how much, how long, and what if, click the link in the description to book a strategy session. Our Next Step Wealth Management service aligns your income sources, your accounts, your investment structure, your withdrawal strategy, your tax experience, your priorities, and gives you a clear picture of what your retirement actually looks like. Because every day you're making decisions without that clarity is a day you're working from uncertainty instead of confidence. And that's worth a conversation. Let's take the next step.